Okay, so this probably should have been the first video I did, but it was just I wanted to get into attributes because attributes are extremely important. What is APM and how do I use it? Or ETC, I'm sorry, or ATC, or Team Center, any cool acronym you want to use. APM was the original name, and then of course it went to, if you think about it, ETC is Enterprise Team Center. That's more about the environment, more about how it's set up. And then Team Center is what you're viewing, okay? So that's kind of a way to look at it. So if I look at this, this is my universes. I still have my web view for those who have Classic. I don't want to mess up what I'm doing, but I would like for it to open it. There we go. So I can still go into web view if I wanted to. That's been around for as long as I can remember, as long as APM, well, not technically web view. Before that, you had Interscope, and then you had web view. But anyway, I digress. So let's go back over here. And then if I look at, if we go down just our menu here, well, let's talk about some important things. Timeline, very important. This is your timeline. There are some really cool things about the timeline once you get into the debug mode, and I'll show you that later. You have the most common timeline. That makes sense, right? And then even this little help thing is really interesting. So if I click help, what does it do? Oh, it takes me to DocOps. Very good. If you want to know anything that I'm saying to prove that I'm saying it wrong or to make it sound better, you can always go here. So like for an example, I was being sarcastic, but realistically, if you ever forget what this view is, because it does have a lot going on, this is very good to help, okay? I probably should have read this before you and I started talking. Like for an example here, okay? Error, let's see if I'm correct. Number of stalls and slows transactions that breach, say, look, I was right. And then errors per interval, errors per interval metric values for the experience node, which is also a really fancy way of saying it's your alerts and expressions. Experience card, open analysis workbook, which we'll get into later, the culprit, which we'll talk about later. Let's see, is there anything that really should stand out? But my point is, it may actually be helpful for you to go here and look at this. Look, there's even more videos. Again, maybe I should have done this before I started this. But anyway, so let's get back to what we were talking about. I don't want to close that because I want to close everything, close that, but I will close the web view because it's not a video about web view. So this little question mark, that could really help you a lot, okay? For those who don't want to do the question mark, then hopefully you'll watch these videos. Well, obviously you are because you're listening now. Again, you got the universes. You'll have to go with your admin to set those up, possibly. You probably don't have permissions to do that. But your universes is a way to group what I call domains. In the older days, if I had, let's say I had servers in one domain for HR, and they were in New Jersey, and then I had servers for, I don't know, just something else, and they were in Japan. Well, it was very hard to make those talk to each other. We had what was called a super mom at one time and all this cool stuff. But with universes, I can link all those together fairly simple. Okay, so we go down experience view. That's what you're looking at here. That's experience cards. I did a video on that. It wasn't very useful, at least I hope it was, but I'm not sure if it was or not, because experience cards don't really have a lot to talk about once you understand what all this means. Again, if you don't know what this means, hit the question mark, or just go back and look at my video. And then just building these is fairly simple, but keep in mind everything's built around getting your attributes correct. Agents view. Now this is something fairly simple. Agents view is really cool. It looks like an experience card, but it's based on your agents. I can do the same thing. I can filter. I can go back in time. I can see all my agents. I can see which one's having problems. I have CPU health out of the box. Here's my garbage collection, number of metrics collected. This is very good for an admin of APM because they can see the health of the agents and they can see if one of the agents has had more problems than another. Okay. So I can click on this and go directly, just isolate this one, but I'm okay not doing that. So let's go back to, but anyway, so agents view, so sorry, I got a little thing. I can sort by health, which is here, the connection status, which is connected, and the CPU and memory. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back. So that's the agents. I like the agents view. It's very new. Again, in the older days, we had to build dashboards to help us look at heap and things like that. And as admins of APM, it was very important to make sure that all your agents were running properly. Now, as an end user, as an application owner, if you have someone on your team who is in charge of managing these agents, especially Docker, well, this is where they would go to do that. And they can build, again, they can build their own they can build their own experience card based off these agents. Okay, so that's very important. So just keep that in mind. Now let's go back. You never want to do the back button. Okay, you want to use your menu. Well, technically I should have hit cancel, but that's okay. So the next view is the map. Now we talked heavily about the map on the first set of videos I did. The map is very important, okay? And again, you should have icons up here depending on different things. So you have status, typology, and attribute. I will talk about those later, possibly, but they're very understanding, okay? And that's pretty much your timeline. Now we talked about the filters. Looks like I have a filter based on my APM agents. Oh, because I was looking at the agents earlier. So, and then if we look at, let's get rid of this because I don't care about that. We talked about how important your attributes were, okay, and so forth, so forth. So we'll come back to all that later. The dashboard. The dashboard is extremely important for those who want to use the dashboard. I know it's kind of relative, but the dashboard is very useful in a way of laying out a quick view. So I have it set to the one that we did earlier, Aon Demo, remember our database and our web service. That's the perspective. We'll get to that in shorter. We'll get back to that shortly, but I want to go back to the default view. And what it does is the default is application, host, and agent. So I'm kind of just going through this quickly. And if you notice, I can see quickly, these have caution, so I can click on this. I can see more details over here, so I have my cautions. My super domain here is having some issues. And I can scroll down and I can see my metric views down here. So the dashboard is actually a very useful thing. I can see my attributes, and I can even create an attribute here if I want to. I think you should be able to. Maybe not. Well, it'd be easier if you got deeper into it. So if we double click into it, we can actually go right to it. Okay, and that took me right to it. Okay, so, and it also created what we call an isolation view, which means it's separate from where I was at, so I don't lose where I was at. But if you notice, it filters me right down to it. I can say, you know what, I'm still having issues. Let's go a little bit deeper. Again, I don't want to do too much here because I hope to do a video on how to triage. But now I can actually see where I'm getting into some issues. Okay. Okay. These are what we call our blame metrics. It's been that term for as long as I can remember, and I've been doing this for almost 10 years. So anyway, so let's go back. Easy way to go back. Watch. Oh, boom, bam, done. Now we're back. But the point to the whole point, and all these are collapsible, right? So the whole point to the dashboard is, again, build your perspective. Remember, we talked about perspectives. Your perspectives, again, are built off your attributes. So it's very, very important when you're onboarding applications. I can't express how important it is to get these attributes correct. So now metric view. Metric view is also fairly new. This is really cool because this is actually what I used to use a lot in Interscope. Now I know this 3075 is actually my test data on demand. And if I click on it, for those who's ever used this in the past, this is a lot like the old investigator, what we call the APM investigator. Now, with saying that, I can see that I have 2 agents installed. I installed these yesterday. I have a Perfmon metric, or not yesterday, I'm sorry, I installed these a while back. And then we have the TDOT web UI. Now, these weren't installed, this agent wasn't installed for the purpose of TDM. It was installed for something else. It's just picking up TDM because TDM is a C# application, so it picks up fairly simple. But anyway, the point is now I have, I can see my agents. Now, I don't know what any of these other agents are. But I should at least be able to click around a little bit. But anyway, so I digress. The whole point to that is you now have a metric view very similar to what you had back in the investigator. So I don't have to bounce around between the web view or the thick client investigator just to look at my agent view, which is what I'm looking at here. Okay, so again, this is the same thing. Notice it's 2 same agents. So pretty cool on that aspect. So we don't have to bounce around between windows. Now, that's your views, okay? Settings. Remember, you have perspectives. Perspectives, we talked about that. It's a way to group your attributes together for your world. Okay. Universes. It's a way to group domains together, what I call domains. And then attributes. We talked about how important the attributes are. It's very, very important to get those together. And then enterprise, that's more of an admin thing. It's setting up an ETC. And then your security is security. Okay. So I hope this was just a quick run through of how all this works. Again, if you have any questions about any of this, especially the cards, most of my questions come off the experience cards because there's just so much to know, right? So if you think about your big five back in the day, we had, your alerts, your stalls, your errors based off of events. That's kind of summed up here, right? You have your, this is based off of alerts, right? I'm just trying to think if there's anything useful. Your slow plus your fails equals your poor transactions. So again, I'll do another video on how to triage. So I don't want it to bounce around that way. If we do separate videos, then it's easier to manage that way. Is there anything else I should be telling you about this? But I don't think so. Again, I'm not 100% sure this is the latest version of APM, but it's still close enough. So I hope this helped. And if you have any questions, please reach out.